Hi, everyone, and welcome to your third lecture for the third week of technical writing. In this lecture, I wanted to cover what are called hip-hop pedagogies, and I will cover them starting with this article, Staying on Our Grind, What Hip-Hop Pedagogies Offer to Technical Writing by Marcos Del Hierro. Remember, pedagogies is kind of our fancy term for teaching strategies or teaching philosophy. So Del Hierro starts off with a little bit of a historical backdrop in his article to talk about some of the methods that hip hop uses, considering itself as a workplace. So he writes that hip hop culture grew as a response to systemic racial and colonial oppression of young people of color in post-industrial New York. So that's kind of our historical backdrop. We're thinking about the period maybe a little bit after the Second Industrial Revolution, and how young people of color were being treated within the society of New York at the time, and what sort of, I guess you'd say, countercultural ways they came up with expressing themselves. And he highlights two methods in particular, what he calls the cipher, and then also what he calls the hip hop booklet, which we'll get back to in just a moment. But that's kind of our historical backdrop. And you might be thinking, hip hop, how could that be important to technical writing? So Del Hierro reminds us that technical communicative practices coming out of non-Western traditions, such as the hip hop examples and methods I will present later in this chapter, are seen as irrelevant to dominant understandings of the field. And that is a major problem for scholars and students coming from non-Western communities. And so, as you know, a lot of this course already has been about kind of disrupting some of those dominant understandings of the field. And here Del Hierro tells us that those dominant understandings are a little bit of a problem for scholars and students who are maybe coming at this from a different perspective as me myself. And so yeah, so let's think about how he talks about that, and then maybe how we can consider it in our class. Um, and so he says that in a decolonial and anti-racist move, more scholars need to center technology as it relates to culture. We are to continue making spaces that honor non-Western rhetorical traditions and ways of knowing. And so we haven't talked too much, I don't think, about technology and the workplace and different kinds of workplaces yet in this course. But this will be a good time to start to think about them, and also, more importantly, thinking about how culture and cultures outside the workplace actually shape those places where we do have to do work. And so he writes, if we can recognize that culture matters, both existing in an organization and those held by individual members, then technical communication must recognize that workplaces are populated by different kinds of bodies and subjectivities that complicate what a workplace is, how it functions, and its particular technologies. And so kind of all packed into those that short sentence there is this idea that, hey, if we can really recognize that things outside of work and the workplace matter to the workplace, and matter to the rest of our lives too, then hey, maybe we can come back to technical writing, technical communication, and understand that these places where we tend to think of them happening are really populated by lots of different people who have lots of different points of view as far as culture and life goes, and that'll disrupt not only our technical writing itself, but also what the workplace is, how it functions, and what kind of technologies are available there, and maybe even how we think about those technologies. And so he has a little bit of a longer section. Maybe it's actually two sections, but I'm going to shorten it into one here, titled "Why Hip Hop Matters to Technical Writing." And so he goes through some of those reasons. So first he talks about its technological innovations. One that he highlights is thinking about the record scratch that you hear by some DJs, but also some of the sampling you hear that happens in some hip hop music. And he says, hey, this is disruptive technological practices where you take an existing technology and you think, how can we see it in a new way, or how can we use it in a new way? And so that's a very hip hop thing that he says that's very tied to our workplaces now, and how we have to think about them. Then he thinks about its complex modes of communication despite policing. So you saw in that first slide that hip hop grew out of policing in post-industrial New York, and so he says that people practicing hip hop had to think of new ways to communicate with each other, new ways to establish means of communication, and so he says, again, that's really important to technical writing, which is so true, right? Because we should always be thinking about how we can create new, innovative kinds of communication. So that's another reason why it matters. And then he goes into his two methods. I mentioned them earlier. I said I'd get back to them, but he mentions hip hop digital booklets, which are essentially your instruction manuals for kind of participating in hip hop and participating in hip hop culture. So he gives a couple of examples: the 10 Crack Commandments by Biggie and 99 Problems by Jay-Z. And he says, hey, like these are really essentially pieces of technical writing. They have informative and instructional kinds of material that let you know how to participate in hip hop culture and participate in the new kinds of workplaces that were being established by these rappers. So that's one, and he says that gives us a kind of blueprint for thinking about our own tech writing. And then he talks about the cipher, which is kind of I guess what you would picture as kind of like a rap battle. He says, hey, this is actually a really important workspace. This is where somebody practicing hip hop goes and revises their material and tests it on users the way we've thought about audiences and users, and then works to revise and edit. So he says, hey, hip hop has all of these lessons for technical writing. And so to get to the kind of heart of this lesson, or what he wants us to take away from it, and when I say us, I mean technical writing teachers, but I'm going to expand it to you as students here, because he's talking a lot about you, and then I'll stop sharing and bring it back to our classroom a little bit. And so he writes that embracing discomfort and seeing what is produced is one of the most powerful behaviors a teacher can model, as well as an invaluable experience for students. To create the conditions for engaging classroom experiences where students can offer, create, test, and interrogate knowledge, they must feel willing to take intellectual risks with each other. And so I'm going to ask you to take a little bit of an intellectual, creative risk in this week's second discussion post, or second assignment, third discussion, I think. And he says, we must find ways of breaking the norms and making noise all through the halls of the academy, if merely to remind ourselves that we are entire human beings in the room and not just floating heads consuming knowledge. Sorry, I think I have extra commas there. I apologize for that. But we are not floating heads consuming knowledge. And so I'll stop my share, bring it back to me. I think in this week, I would have loved to do a little bit of maybe a historical lesson or something like that on a particular rapper, or someone from hip hop culture that we could all kind of get behind and think about for digital booklets. And Del Hierro also writes about using the cipher as a kind of classroom way of teaching. But we have our shortened session. We're all entirely online. So I think what we're going to do, and I'll put more about this in the discussion assignment, and the discussion and the assignment, sorry. But I think what we'll do is maybe we'll think about picking a song and writing an instruction manual for enjoying that song. Like, what's the best context? What's the best best means of enjoying it? Should you look it up on YouTube for the video? Should you open Spotify, or maybe a better streaming service that offers a little bit better quality? Like, how do you go and enjoy a piece of art, and maybe how can that instructional design for a cultural piece like that inform our own technical writing workspaces? So that's what I'm going to be drawing on Del Hierro's article here, and that'll be the assignment. But again, I hope you enjoyed the lectures this week. They were meant to give you a new kind of way of thinking about technical writing as it relates to culture, as it relates to social justice and spaces, and here even music and hip hop. And yeah, I hope it was just really interesting, kind of entertaining material for you. And yeah, like I've said a couple of times, this week's discussions and assignments will ask you to kind of experiment with each. And so we'll see how it goes. As always, I'll be active in the discussion as much as I can, and be giving feedback on assignments as we go as well. So thanks for listening this week, and I'll look forward to what everyone comes up with on Canvas. Thanks, everyone. Bye.